The lights were blinding, the cameras were rolling, and millions of viewers across America were watching live. On stage, Donald Trump leaned forward, his voice sharp and commanding, throwing out accusation after accusation. Obama failed the American people. The economy was a disaster. He lied about the numbers. The audience shifted uncomfortably. It wasn't the first time Trump had attacked Barack Obama's record, but this time was different. Obama was sitting just a few feet away, and he wasn't about to let the moment pass. Then it happened. Without raising his voice, Obama leaned into the microphone and said the words that would instantly freeze the room. "That's simply not true, Donald, and you know it." The crowd erupted. Some gasped, others laughed nervously. Trump's face tightened, his hands gripping the podium. What came next would flip the entire exchange on its head, shattering Trump's narrative in front of a live audience and the entire nation. Because in that moment, Barack Obama wasn't just defending himself, he was about to expose the truth with facts, receipts, and a composure that made the attack look like a desperate gamble. The setting was the grand stage of the National Leadership Forum, a high-profile televised event broadcast coast to coast. The air inside the studio was electric. You could feel the tension in every corner. Bright stage lights bathed the two podiums in a sharp glow, while the audience, packed with journalists, political figures, and everyday citizens, sat forward in their seats, sensing this wasn't going to be a polite conversation. Donald Trump, positioned on the right podium, stood in his signature dark suit and red tie, papers in hand, his eyes locked on the man to his left. Barack Obama, in a calm navy suit and blue tie, stood with his hands lightly resting on the podium, his expression measured, almost unreadable. Between them, the moderator sat at a sleek glass desk, shuffling notes, trying to maintain a neutral expression, though even she seemed to sense the storm brewing. The cameras weren't just filming two men, they were capturing a collision of legacies, egos, and fundamentally different visions of truth. On the surface, it was a discussion about economic policy and presidential records, but beneath it, the stakes were far higher: credibility, personal reputation, and the narrative that would ripple across headlines the next morning. In their front row sat advisors, aides, and former staffers, people who knew the histories, the accomplishments, and the missteps better than anyone. In the back, journalists had their laptops open, fingers ready to type. Everyone in that room knew this wasn't just another televised debate. This was about to be a public test of facts versus fire, composure versus confrontation, and the outcome could shift public opinion in real time. The first few minutes of the forum moved briskly. The moderator asked broad questions about economic growth, healthcare, and foreign policy. Obama answered with measured detail, citing data and policy outcomes. Trump, on the other hand, wasted no time sharpening his attacks, his tone growing more pointed with each sentence. Leaning into his microphone, Trump delivered his first jab. President Obama presided over one of the weakest economic recoveries in history. The country was a mess, unemployment was rampant, people were hurting, and frankly, he lied to the American people about the numbers. The words hung in the air. A few in the audience shifted uncomfortably, others nodded along. But Trump wasn't done.
he shuffled his papers and continued. The so-called job growth was a media fantasy. Ask anyone in the Rust Belt, they'll tell you Obama's administration abandoned them. The moderator tried to steer the conversation toward policy solutions, but Trump kept pushing. His voice grew louder, the cadence more aggressive. You didn't deliver, Barack. You promised hope and change, and you left people with broken promises. Obama remained still, hands clasped on the podium. His eyes didn't narrow, his voice didn't interrupt. He let Trump speak, perhaps knowing that silence in that moment was more powerful than immediate defense. But the atmosphere in the studio was shifting. The audience could feel the build-up, like the seconds before a thunderstorm breaks. Trump's strategy was clear: throw out broad accusations, undermine credibility, and force Obama into a defensive corner. In the front row, some of Trump's supporters smirked, sensing victory. A few journalists began typing furiously, their headlines already forming. The tension thickened. You could almost hear the collective breath being held. And then the moment of escalation. Trump stepped closer to his podium, pointed directly at Obama, and said with emphasis, "You didn't just fail, you lied, and the American people deserve the truth tonight." The audience gasped softly. It was the kind of direct, personal accusation that can tip a debate into something far more volatile. The room braced for a rebuttal. Obama looked up, the faintest trace of a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. The storm Trump had been building was about to break, but not in the way he expected. For a moment, the studio seemed frozen in time. Trump's last words, "You didn't just fail, you lied," echoed in the charged silence. The moderator glanced nervously between the two men, clearly unsure if she should step in. Obama slowly straightened his posture, leaning forward just enough to close the distance without taking a single step. His voice, when it came, was calm, almost too calm for the moment. "Let me correct the record, Donald." The audience reacted instantly, a low ripple of murmurs, gasps, and the faint rustle of reporters adjusting in their seats. Everyone knew that when Obama began a sentence like that, what followed was rarely in the other person's favor. He continued, eyes locked on Trump, "The facts matter here. And while I understand your desire to paint your own picture of my presidency, the numbers tell a very different story." Trump shifted his weight, gripping the sides of the podium. The moderator leaned back, giving Obama the floor without protest. Obama's tone was measured, each word deliberate. "When I took office, this country was losing 800,000 jobs a month. By the time I left, we had seen 75 consecutive months of job growth, the longest streak in American history." The audience broke into scattered applause. Trump opened his mouth to interject, but Obama raised his hand slightly, not to silence him rudely, but to signal that the facts were not yet finished. He continued, eyes locked on Trump, "We cut the unemployment rate in half. We brought the auto industry back from the brink. And those numbers didn't come from my staff or my speeches. They came from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, a nonpartisan institution whose credibility you may find inconvenient but cannot erase." The room erupted, a mix of applause, cheers, and a few shouts. Even the moderator's eyebrows lifted. Trump blinked rapidly, as if deciding whether to fire back or let it go. But the crowd's energy had shifted. The authority in Obama's voice, combined with the weight of verifiable facts, was pushing the momentum sharply in his direction.
In that instant, it wasn't just a political exchange. It was the reclaiming of a narrative, live in front of millions, and Trump knew it. Obama didn't rush. He let the applause settle, his eyes scanning the audience as if inviting them to lean in closer. Then, with the precision of a man who had spent decades navigating both politics and public scrutiny, he began dismantling Trump's claims one by one. Donald, you mentioned the Rust Belt. Let's talk about that. In 2009, entire towns were on the verge of collapse. We stepped in with an auto industry rescue plan that saved over 1 million jobs. I visited those factories. I shook hands with the men and women who told me they would have lost everything if we hadn't acted. On the big screens behind the stage, producers cut to archived footage. Obama walking through a Detroit assembly plant, hard head on, speaking with workers. The audience applauded again. You say the recovery was weak, but under our administration, the stock market more than doubled. Millions gained access to healthcare. We created more private sector jobs than the previous two administrations combined. Trump shifted his weight again, muttering something under his breath. Obama didn't flinch. And let's be clear, these aren't my numbers. These are from the Congressional Budget Office, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and yes, even independent economists who have no stake in defending me. He paused, letting the weight of verifiable data hang in the air. Then his tone softened. But beyond the numbers, there are people. I remember a single mother in Ohio who wrote to me, saying the Affordable Care Act meant her son could finally get the surgery he needed, or the veteran in Indiana who told me that a new manufacturing job gave him back his dignity. These aren't statistics, Donald. They're the lives behind the work we did. The audience broke into sustained applause, some even rising to their feet. The contrast was impossible to miss. Trump's attacks had been broad and emotional. Obama's defense was rooted in evidence, compassion, and lived experience. In that moment, the debate wasn't just about who was louder or sharper. It was about who had the receipts. And Obama had just laid them all on the table. Trump gripped the edges of his podium so tightly his knuckles whitened. The applause for Obama hadn't fully died down when he leaned forward, his voice rising over the lingering cheers. Look, I've talked to people, plenty of people, who say those numbers are fake. They're cooked. Everyone knows it. The tone was defensive, the phrasing vague. He glanced toward the audience, perhaps expecting nods of agreement, but the reaction was muted. The media covered for you, Barack. They didn't report the real unemployment. They didn't talk about the factories that shut down under your watch. And sure, you've got stories, very nice stories, but people were hurting, and I'm the one who told them the truth. A few claps came from the far right of the room, but they were swallowed by the silence from the rest of the audience. Cameras caught a handful of attendees exchanging skeptical glances. Obama stood quietly, hands folded, watching. The contrast was stark. Where Obama's defense had been steady, layered with facts and personal anecdotes, Trump's rebuttal felt scattered, heavy on emotion, but light on specifics. The moderator shifted in her seat, sensing the energy change. For the first time in the exchange, Trump seemed to be talking to fill the air
rather than control it. Obama didn't need to say anything. The room's dynamic had already shifted. The applause, the nodding audience members, and the hushed attentiveness, they all signaled the same thing. The momentum was gone from Trump's corner, and everyone watching, in the studio and at home, could see it.
When the dust settled after that explosive exchange, one truth stood out. Moments like these aren't just about political theater. They're about the fight for truth in an age where misinformation spreads faster than facts. What Barack Obama did that night wasn't just fact-checking. It was reclaiming the narrative in real time, before the lie could become the headline. We live in an era where half-truths and outright falsehoods can dominate the conversation within minutes. Social media rewards speed, not accuracy. And for those willing to bend the facts to suit their goals, that's a powerful weapon. But Obama's on-air dismantling of Trump's claims proved that there's still a way to win against that tide, with preparation, calm, and undeniable evidence. This moment also highlights the power of presence. Obama didn't just respond with statistics. He paired facts with personal stories, making the truth relatable and undeniable. It's one thing to throw numbers at someone. It's another to show the human impact behind those numbers. That's why his rebuttal landed so hard. The deeper takeaway is that defending the truth isn't optional. It's a responsibility. If lies go unchecked, they don't just tarnish reputations, they shape policy, influence elections, and shift public trust. When leaders choose to confront falsehoods head on, they're not just defending themselves, they're defending the integrity of the conversation for everyone. And for the audience watching at home, the ripple effect matters. Seeing a public figure refuse to be bullied, refuse to be misrepresented, and instead calmly dismantle a false narrative sends a message. It's possible to push back against misinformation without losing composure. You don't have to shout louder. You have to speak clearer. In the end, this wasn't just about Trump or Obama. It was about the larger fight we're all part of, to make sure the truth still has a voice in a world that's often too loud to hear it. The lesson is simple. When you know your facts and you know your story, no amount of bluster can shake it. What we witnessed in that broadcast was more than just a verbal sparring match between two political heavyweights. It was a reminder that truth still matters, and it's worth defending no matter how loud the opposition gets. Obama's calm, calculated dismantling of Trump's claims didn't just fact-check the moment. It set a standard for how to stand your ground in the face of misinformation. And now, that responsibility isn't just on leaders or public figures. It's on all of us. Every time we share a story, repeat a claim, or post a comment online, we become part of the chain that either spreads truth or fuels deception. That's why it's so important to pause, verify, and stand by facts, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it means challenging voices we might otherwise agree with. If this moment fired you up, let it push you to be more than just a spectator. Defend people when they're misrepresented. Speak up when you see falsehoods spreading. Educate yourself on the issues so you can respond with confidence instead of volume. And here's the most important part. Don't just keep this conversation here. Share this video with someone who needs to see what it looks like when truth wins in real time. Post it, send it, talk about it. The more examples we put into the world of calm, fact-based pushback, the more we normalize it, and the harder it becomes for misinformation to thrive. If you want to see more moments where powerful voices stand up for the truth and more breakdowns of the stories behind those moments, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We're building a community here, one that values facts over fury and substance over spectacle. Because at the end of the day, the truth can only win if we make sure it's heard.